This is me. That's my account. That's my brand. This is me over here. That's my brand over there. They're not the same. You may see me over there, but I am not that thing.
Be honest with me. Honest with me. Honest with me. Did I really give it all I had? Be honest with me. Honest with me. Honest with me.
What's going on, everybody? This is Sean David Grant with another episode. Before we get started, please subscribe, like, ring the bell, leave a comment, share, do all the things. All right, so my boy Prafit Josiah hit me up. He is starting his own podcast, and he asked me to do a video on how to set up your podcast for beginners. I know a lot of you guys are creatives. You want to get your voice out there. So essentially, let's just talk about what a podcast is and the best ways to get your voice out to the world. So essentially, a podcast is any form of recording, video, or audio that's broadcasted over the internet. So essentially, blogging. There was a time when blogging was very popular, which is just your written, kind of like your journal, your thoughts to the world. It's essentially that over audio or over video. So that's what podcasts are. So essentially, podcasts can be whatever you want. There's really no rules here. Whatever you want to say, whatever you want to broadcast and represent yourself as, that's a podcast. Find out what it is that you care about the most, because you kind of want to focus. There's not a rule, but you kind of want to focus a little bit so that you'll be attracting fans of whatever it is your focus is. If you're kind of all over the place, one day you talk about sports, the next day you talk about politics, the next day you talk about NASCAR, which is, I guess, a sport, or finances or whatever, which we're kind of guilty of as well. But if you're too all over the place, it'll be hard to attract fans that way because they won't know what you are. All right, we're in an age of niches, and if you don't make it obvious what your niche is, people who are looking for that niche are going to have a hard time finding it. So you do want to define what you are to a certain extent. Again, it's your show, your rules. If you want to talk about something else on different days, that's on you. But just know that we're in a very, very niche, however you want to say it, society right now. And if you vary too far away from what people really, really care about, they may log off. They may check out. For instance, if your show is all about Marvel and superheroes, and then you start talking about Bitcoin, like, people are like, what? I came here from I don't care about Bitcoin. I don't care about all that stuff. So you just have to be careful. Now, if you have an engaged audience and they just love you and they just want to hear what you think about anything, that's a different thing. But starting that way is really hard, to just kind of be everything to everybody. It's really difficult. Find out what motivates you the most, what you would do for free, because honestly, if you're podcasting, you're most likely going to be doing it for free. Now, there's ways to make money, but just know that this is not like a lucrative business. But I will tell you how you can make money from your podcast later on. Now, he also asked me, should he do video and audio or just audio podcasts? Now, some people may not think of videos as a podcast, but it's literally the same thing. You can actually even do video podcasts on iTunes. So, but traditionally, podcasts are thought of as audio. So you don't have to do video to have a great podcast. A lot of the best podcasts don't have video elements, but video really helps. My favorite podcast is the /Filmcast. Just recently, they've been adding some video elements. But I love the show even before that. Honestly, I didn't even know what they looked like until recently. So you absolutely do not have to have video as a part of your podcast. But as far as marketing goes, video really helps. People love to see people's faces. They just kind of want to know what you look like so they can connect with you and feel like they know you. So if you're kind of faceless, like just mysterious, it's a little bit harder to build a fan base because they won't know what they're getting when they buy into you. Okay? So make it as personal as possible until you can afford video. We were audio only for several years, and then we started adding video, and then it really started blowing up because people felt like they knew us, they connected with us. Prafit also asked me, how do you find royalty-free background music for your podcast? One solution is a website called Epidemic Sound. If you register for Epidemic Sound, you can use their royalty-free sound effects and background music in your podcast. That way you don't have to worry about the music you're using. Now, us in particular, we have producers on our team. I'm a producer, my sister's a producer, DJ Jeremiah is a producer, so we have decided to just make our own background music. Mike Sarge made us some instrumentals, my sister's made us some instrumentals, me and Jeremiah have made instrumentals, and we just rotate our own instrumentals just so we can avoid all of that nonsense. Because even when you use a royalty-free site like Epidemic Sound, if you ever cancel, you can't use those sounds again. They won't make you take them down from your old videos. If you cancel with Epidemic Sound and you keep using the sound effects, they could call you to the carpet on using their sounds after you cancel. So it's a small little thing. I may do a video on how to make your own background music one day. It's not that difficult. If you just want something, just behind you so it cancels out the noise. If you listen carefully, you can hear my laptop is going crazy right now and it's making a lot of fan noise. So just to get above that noise level, instrumental can help drown some of that out and keep your audience interested in what you're talking about. It's not always necessary. Some of the best podcasts don't have any music. Not having music can also help you, because if you're taking clips and you're using it in ads or whatever you want to use those clips for, it would be a lot easier to use it for whatever you want if there wasn't already music embedded in the file. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to have background music, but it does help build a mood. We're kind of a hip hop show, so having slight hip hop sounding beats in the background kind of adds to the mood. So if you have to have them, try to make them yourself or go to a site like Epidemic Sound. I don't get sponsored by them, so I'm just telling you what I know. And there's other sites too. If you don't like them, go find somebody else. But royalty-free music websites, is sign up for them and you can use whatever they have. All right, so let's say you have your podcast idea. You watched my video on how to brand your podcast, come up with a brand name for your podcast, and your podcast idea is super dope. Now you've recorded your podcast. You decided to go audio only to start. Now you have some files. What do you do with them? How do you get those out to iTunes and Stitcher and all these different podcast outlets, right? Well, the way it works, if you want to know exactly how it works, if you go to some of these websites and just do what they say, you don't really have to worry about this, but this is how it actually works. The world of podcasts are centered around RSS feeds. They're these XML files that give the podcast outlets instructions on what to do with your file, where it's located, the file type, the author of the file, any detail about the file, right? All that is embedded in that XML file, also called an RSS feed, right? So what may be the misconception about this is if you're an artist like I am, you may think about this as like music distribution, where you send your song file to Spotify through Nectar distribution or TuneCore or DistroKid. They actually send the file to the outlets. That's not what happens when you do podcasting. What happens with podcasting is you fill out your XML file, that RSS feed, and whenever you have a new episode, you just add new information for the new episode to your file. The podcast aggregators, the people who are looking for that RSS feed that you've submitted to them, when you become a podcaster on iTunes or a podcaster on Stitcher, you have to send them your RSS feed, and they just constantly monitor your RSS feed for new episodes. So they don't get your music, they don't get your podcast, they don't get your whatever you're sending them. They're just reading the file and they're just displaying your file wherever you have it hosted to the world. All right, so they never have to touch any files at all. So that's how it really works. So you need a way to host your audio file. You need a way to host your video file. You need a way to host your podcast graphic, that square image, right? So that's where some of these companies come in to help you with that. You don't need to have them. For the first 7 years of our podcast, I hosted everything myself and I made that RSS file myself. I don't encourage you to do that as a beginner. So if you don't want to do that, there are sites like Lisbon, Blueberry. We use Castos, which is a great site, especially if you have a WordPress website, because it's embedded in your WordPress. So all you have to do is make a post on your WordPress site, and it turns it into a podcast for you. It's amazing. We love them. We've tried several different methods of podcasting. We tried Blueberry. We tried SoundCloud, which also allows you to create an RSS feed from your SoundCloud files. But the best luck we've ever had was with Castos, because we have several WordPress sites. It's embedded in there. The great thing about Castos, with one account, you can have several different podcasts under that same account, which is awesome. Unlimited storage. So again, I'm not sponsored by Castos, but we love Castos. So it was a godsend when we found Castos. So I would recommend Castos, but all those other sites are great, including Anchor. Our friend Rick Sincere with MTMV, they use Anchor, which is a great solution because it's all in one. You can record your podcast on Anchor. You can upload files to Anchor. You can, do a lot of stuff with Anchor as well, and it makes it simple, and they send it out for you. Just go to one of those companies, do exactly what they tell you to do with your file, and you will be broadcast to all the different podcast outlets. They'll do it for you. So now you have your podcast up. It's on iTunes. It's on Stitcher. It's everywhere. How do you find out how it's doing? Now, if you went with one of those companies, they have their own analytics built in. So you can see how many clicks you got, how many, where the clicks came from. Was it a Apple device that saw it or an Android device or whatever they build into their analytics? All that is in there so you can see which episodes are doing the best. How long are people listening? Now, there are a couple other things you can do, which I recommend. iTunes is kind of the big daddy here, right? iTunes is the one most people talk about when they talk about podcasting. Spotify is on the rise with podcasting, but still iTunes is usually considered, from my experience, as the big dog, right? So I typically want to know exactly what's happening with iTunes. iTunes doesn't tell you how many subscribers you have technically, but it does tell you how many devices watched a certain episode, which will kind of give you backwards way of figuring out how many subscribers you have. Because if you release a brand new episode and you had 30 devices listen to it, it doesn't mean you have 30 subscribers, but you have 30 active subscribers, I would say. There's another way, which is awesome, is a website called Chartable. Chartable keeps up with your podcasts on various outlets, on iTunes, and it'll tell you your rank, which is great because there's no real way to find out how you're ranked easily. Now, there are other ways. I'm not saying there's no way to do it, but this is the best way I found to keep track of how well you're doing in America, overseas, wherever you live. You can find out, is your podcast trending in any market, which is awesome. Just good information to know. Man, we're killing it in Africa right now. There's like 7 countries in Africa we're charting. That's maybe good information. Like maybe you need to pay more attention to those countries when you talk on your podcast, or maybe you need to set up a tour or whatever. Like, it's just extra information to help you out. So we really recommend Chartable, but I also recommend going straight to Podcast Connect on iTunes. iTunes has several different ways, depending on if you are an app builder or you're an artist distributing to iTunes. They have like these back-end connects, they call them, like iTunes Connect. They created a new portal called Podcast Connect, where you can see the podcasts you have on iTunes and you can manage them. You can update your graphic, you can update the feed, you can see your stats, and it's still kind of beta to me. It's not perfect. It doesn't tell me everything I need to know, but again, iTunes is the big dog, Apple's the big dog, so I usually want to go and see straight from Apple what my podcast is doing on Apple. You are rolling now. You have your podcast up, you know how to check the stats for it. How do you market this thing? Should you have a brand just for this podcast? Should you have a social media handle just for this podcast? And I would say absolutely. You should have a podcast brand specifically on social media for that podcast. The reason is, from my experience, when I first started working on Trackstars, I kind of mixed the worlds a little bit. Because I had limited time, I would post about what I was doing personally and what Trackstars was doing on the same handle. That's a little messy, because what you want to try to do as soon as you can is establish a brand personality for your podcast. It's not what Sean thinks. This is what Trackstars thinks. And you have to carefully manage the perceptions of what your brand's personality is. If you start saying stuff on your social media that sounds too much like Sean says and not Trackstar says, it's going to be confusing. right? So you got to make sure you're separating you out of your brand, right? It may be similar things that you would say, but when people see Track Stars or whatever the brand name of your podcast is, they're going to be assuming that the brand is saying this. Now, this may not be a problem if you're podcasting by yourself, but there's a few people involved in Track Stars. I can't go on the Track Stars account and just start popping off about politics or my feeling about so-and-so, because it's going to look like Track Stars is saying that. You know what I mean? So you really have to separate personal accounts from business accounts and make sure you're acting appropriately on each type of account. All right. Hopefully that helps. I see this a lot, especially when people are starting, is they want to keep content coming out on their brand account. So they just talk about what they personally are going through. It's just confusing. So just make sure you separate that out. I promise it'll make sense later on. You can talk about your brand on your personal account as long as you link back to the account so people know this is me. That's my account. That's my brand. This is me over here. That's my brand over there. They're not the same. You may see me over there, but I am not that thing. Okay, so just keep it separate. I promise it'll help you in the long run. You're gonna end up doing it anyway, so I'm just trying to save you time. Okay, last thing, this is probably what a lot of people want to know about. How do you make money with a podcast? Now, you're probably not going to make money. I'll just say that. Do it for the love first and foremost. It's really difficult to predict if your podcast is going to be some big sensation, because really the way podcasting and monetary benefits of podcasting work, it's a popularity contest. You have to be popular. You have to have a lot of people watching your podcast or listening to your podcast, and they have to be so many that when you put out a link or you say so-and-so is sponsored by such and such, that enough of them will actually do something about that and you benefit from them doing it. Let me clarify. All right. So one of the major ways podcasts make money is through sponsorships. A lot of times when you listen to a podcast, you'll hear them say, this is sponsored by Skillshare, or this is sponsored by Casper mattresses, or whatever. I hear those all the time. Now, some of those podcasts are getting paid upfront, which means their audience is so big that that sponsor is willing to give them a lump sum no matter what. So in that case, they may just talk about a sponsor and they'll never even give you a promo code or anything, because they already got paid. They already got their money. All they care about is talking about the sponsor and moving on. Some people who get paid up front still talk about promo codes because they want to prove to the sponsor that the money they paid them in advance is worth their time, right? So that's one way to get paid. Most of the podcasters you hear about are affiliates. They're using affiliate links, meaning they don't get paid up front. They only get paid when the audience does what they say to do, right? So if I have 100 listeners and I have a sponsorship from Casper mattresses, but my audience is all 18 and under, and I tell them to go buy a mattress, the chances of them buying a mattress at 12 years old or 14 is probably pretty low, and that is not going to gain me any money at all. It's not easy, because even if you have a good sized audience, it really depends on a lot of factors. The buying power of your audience, how closely does the brand fit with your audience? There's all kinds of things to consider, but it's not hopeless. If you're a very small podcast starting out, then Anchor is probably a really good solution for you, because Anchor provides those built-in advertising opportunities for you, right? It doesn't matter how big your podcast is, there's still opportunities for advertising with Anchor. Whereas if you're kind of on your own doing it through another platform, Castos, I think, gives you opportunities as well. I don't know how big you have to be, but different platforms will give you opportunities, including Lisbon and all the rest. I think it matters kind of your size. A lot of the bigger advertising opportunities, you have to be a really big, like I'm talking about really big, 100,000 listeners a month type big. We've applied for certain platforms and gotten denied because we didn't have enough listeners. We're talking about serial level podcasts. We're talking about Joe Button level podcasts, right? So it's really difficult to get that kind of look, but there are alternatives, right? If you're building your audience and they love you, even if it's small, I mean, trickling of a couple extra bucks a month, $10 a month, $30 a month, all that can help. That can help with buying cables. That can help with buying a lens maybe one day for your camera, new microphones. Like all of that can help. So I would look into those programs even if you don't have a huge audience, because it can help. And here's one thing. I was always hesitant about sponsors when we were smaller because I was afraid that the audience would think we're trying to milk them for money, which is technically not. I mean, it's true. That's kind of what we're trying to do. But what you're really trying to do is get them to support you, right? Because it costs money to do a podcast. They're listening to it for free, so help us out. That's really what you're saying. You're not milking them for money. I apologize. But we had a sponsorship with Audible.com. And we did it for a few months and it actually worked. People actually used the link and we were getting money from it. But I think we just got caught up with a bunch of stuff and we stopped doing it. And I remember we got some messages from people saying, hey, what happened to the Audible sponsorship? That was really valuable. I appreciate those deals. I think we had Audible, we had Warby Parker. And people were like, I wanted the 25% off coupon or whatever you said was in that. So some people who love you, they want to hear sponsors on your podcast because it makes them feel like they have a chance to support you even more. Now, that's not the only way to make money on your podcast. You can also sign up for Patreon. Patreon is an awesome way to get your core listeners, your biggest fans, to support you monthly. You can set up the tiers, $1 a month, $5 a month, $20, $100, $1 million a month, whatever your audience is willing to pay. You can set up a tier and give them extra stuff. You can give them exclusive episodes. You can send them a t-shirt. You can do whatever you want. Like it's really just a way for them to contribute to your vision and your podcast. And if they love you, they'll do it. We actually did something similar. We kind of set up our own membership. We're considering doing Patreon in the future, but we kind of set up our own kind of Patreon. So I won't get into that. That's a bit. If you get all those things in place and you're up and running, you are now a podcaster. Welcome to the team. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be a ride. The most important thing is keep getting better. Listen to the feedback of your audience. They like your show. Obviously, that's why they're listening. Don't just blindly do whatever you feel like doing. Listen to their feedback. They're going to tell you what's working, what's not working. They're going to tell you what you need to do more or less. And the better you get, the more you're committed to getting better and taking their feedback and improving your audio quality, improving your topics or how you structure your show. It's going to just keep getting better and better, and you'll find your sweet spot, and it's going to be an amazing success, and then you're going to be famous, and then I'm going to have to ask for your autograph and all that stuff. All right. So hopefully all of that helps you. Let me know if you have any further questions about podcasting. I've been doing it now for literally 15 years of podcasting. So I know a little bit. I don't know everything, so I'll point you in the right direction if you reach out. Let me know what else you want me to talk about on this channel. Like and subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, share, do all the things, please. Thank you for watching. Love you. Peace. Welcome to the Sean David Grant podcast. This is our first episode. We will be discussing the evolution of Christian hip hop from Lecrae to Rockstar JT. First,